It's now my honor and distinct pleasure to welcome and introduce our opening presenter, Jon Macaskill, a retired Navy SEAL commander turned consultant and mindfulness and meditation teacher. Jon was born in South Africa and grew up in Ruston, Louisiana. After graduating high school, he served as an enlisted sailor in the U.S. Navy, receiving an appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy, where he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics 4 years later. And after graduating, basic underwater demolition SEAL BUDS training. Jon went on to serve another 18 years in the Naval Special Warfare community. He did 7 combat deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and off the coast of Somalia. He did additional work in Panama, Jordan, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates. Later in his career, Jon attended the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, earning an MS degree in operations research. After retiring from the Navy in August 2020, Jon served briefly as the Deputy Executive Director for the veterans nonprofit Veterans Path. He now hosts and runs a podcast called Men Talking Mindfulness. Jon does keynote speaking engagements on developing leadership, grit, and resilience, and owns his own consulting company, Macaskill Consulting, LLC. In all 3 roles, Jon's desire is to improve cultures and individuals through mindfulness, meditation, vulnerability, and compassion. Jon's wife, Becca, also served in the Navy and is now a civilian orthopedic physician assistant. Together, they are proud parents of 3 small children, and recently, after an adventurous 6 months as a family in an RV on the road, they settled on a small farm in Colorado Springs. For this evening, if you have questions come up, please do jot those down and hold those, and we will have plenty of opportunity at the end of Jon's presentation to entertain those. So thank you so much for being here, and welcome to you, Jon.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Fleet. Thank you for having me. Thank you to all of you. I certainly appreciate it. And what I'm going to be presenting on tonight is the science and benefits of mindfulness and meditation. Though after 113 consecutive weeks, you may already know a lot of this. So hopefully this isn't too redundant, though I guess if it is redundant, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We learn through repetition. So maybe it's a repetition for you. So that said, I do have some slides, and I'm going to try to do this correctly and not dial myself out of this. So let's see. Hopefully you guys are looking at my slides. I see the thumbs up. Great. All right. So yeah, what I'm here to do is talk to you about the science and benefits of mindfulness. And before that, like I said before, I want to thank you for having me, but I also want to thank all of you for what it is you're doing with teaching mindfulness to those in public safety, to first responders, and for what it is you do every day, day in and day out. It is an honor and privilege to be here with you this evening. So that said, what I want you to do is stop what you're doing. Of course, if you're paying attention to me, don't stop doing that, but stop everything else that you're doing on the side and be mindful. Pay attention to what is happening right here, right now. And now I want you to tune out for just a second. I want you to think about the things that are stressing you out, that are causing anxiety or maybe even sadness in your life. It may be personal, it may be professional, it may be bills, it may be what's to cook for dinner for the kids, it may be softball game, who knows? But I want you to think about those things. And even saying those words, those sentences, those things that we experience in our lives, that's causing some anxiety to me, even though I'm not thinking about it personally. I'm thinking about what yours might be. It's causing some anxiety, and my body is reacting. And I want you to notice what your body is doing. Notice how your body is reacting to just thinking about those things in your lives. Your hands may be sweating. You may feel some tension in your forehead. You may feel some tightness in your shoulders. And that's your body's reaction to threats. That's your sympathetic nervous system kicking in to protect you from a threat. That is not what we experience every day. It's not a threat that we're experiencing. We're experiencing life events, and our body and our mind are interpreting it as threats. So what I want to do next is show you that you can take back that reaction, that sympathetic nervous system reaction, and turn it into a response simply through breathing. So now what I want you to do is just close your eyes or soften your gaze if closing your eyes is not necessarily comfortable or safe. And just notice the physical sensations associated with your breath. Notice where and how the air is entering your body, where and how you feel it. And then notice the exact opposite, where and how you feel it leaving your body. You may be breathing in through your nose, and if so, you may feel that air at the very tips of your nostrils, and then hitting the back of your throat and going down to your lungs and expanding them. And the reverse as you breathe out. The lungs contracting, air coming up, maybe going out through your mouth, over your tongue, and over your lips. And notice as your lungs expand on the in-breath, your chest expands, your diaphragm pushes down, and your belly may be expanding as well. And the reverse as you breathe out. Chest, belly contracting, diaphragm rising. Just focus on that breath. For one more breath, all the physical sensations associated with it. And now softly open your eyes or refocus your gaze. And how did that feel? You may have noticed a difference there. You may have noticed if your heart rate had increased, now it's slowed down. If you had some tension in your forehead, that may have been released. If you had that tightness in your shoulders, that may have been released. That's your sympathetic, or rather your parasympathetic nervous system kicking in to turn that sympathetic reaction into a parasympathetic response. You're taking control back and you're calming yourself down through nothing more than your breath and focusing on that physical sensation, tuning out the rest of the world, the noise that is out there. So why do we do that? One, I want to show you that you can take control back and take what we perceive as threats and the reaction associated with that and turn it into a response. Because those perceived threats are, again, nothing more than life events most of the time. Most of the time. We still want to be able to react to real threats, but we want the ability to turn that reaction into a response for life events. Two, I want to get you focused on the presentation, and that helps to tune out some of that noise that is coming in and get you focused. And third, it allows me personally to calm myself down as I present to a new group. So I appreciate that opportunity. All right, so Jon went through a quick bio. I'm not going to go much further into that, but I was born in Cape Town, raised in Louisiana, enlisted in the Navy, got picked up for the Naval Academy, and then went into the SEAL teams. And now I teach meditation, which is a natural progression for a special operator. Obviously, that is not the truth, but how did I get from there to here? How did I get from being a special operator in the Naval Special Warfare community to teaching meditation? Well, I personally had my own experiences with stress and anxiety and depression to the point where I actually considered some very dark options and sought counseling and got help. And one of the counselors recommended mindfulness and meditation to me. And in all honesty, I laughed at him. I laughed at him at first because, one, I was naive. Two, I didn't know that meditation had performance enhancing aspects to it. And three, I was naive. So 1 and 3, I was naive. So he told me that meditation and mindfulness is not just to address the aspects of depression, anxiety, stress, but they can be used to enhance performance. And as a special operator, that was my language. I wanted to perform better than my enemy on the battlefield, and I also wanted to perform better than my buddy right next to me. So when he sold it to me as a performance enhancer, I decided to jump right in. So day one, I went and downloaded the latest meditation app, and I got an hour-long meditation ready, and I jumped right into an hour-long meditation. And about 17 seconds into that hour-long meditation, my mind was everywhere but the meditation. It was on my to-do list. It was on my car's maintenance. It was on what I had to do for work. It was on my family. So it was on everything except that meditation. And I got out of that meditation very frustrated. And I went back to that same counselor and I said, you know what, this meditation stuff, it's not working for me. And he asked me what I did. And I told him that I sat down for an hour-long meditation and it didn't work. He said, well, that's like lining up at the starting line of a marathon without ever having run a mile, or going to the weight room and getting under 350 pounds on the bench press without ever having done any weightlifting before. You don't do that. You work your way up to it. So he introduced me to some basic breathing like we did at the beginning, and showed me that not all meditation is necessarily an hour long or super in depth. It could be very simple. It could be very simple and short. And I started doing simple box breathing, and I noticed the improvements there. I noticed how those improvements, as I did more and more of those meditations, they lasted longer. And then after about 2 months or so of more in-depth and longer meditations, I started to see that in addition to the performance enhancing aspects that I was experiencing, I started experiencing the quote unquote side effects. And that's where I was not being as depressed. I was not dealing with stress in the same way. I was still getting stressed, but I was processing it in a much more healthy way. And the same with anxiety. I still would experience anxiety, but I would note it and I would sit with it and process it. So I feel that meditation and mindfulness changed my life for the better, and quite frankly, saved my life. So I feel it's my duty and an obligation now to teach it, to pay it forward. So that's how I got from where I was to where I am. So if you would, this is where I'm going to have you guys do an activity. One of the things that mindfulness and meditation does, first off, is it actually teaches us to be less of a multitasker. Multitasking, one, it's a myth. And then two, it's really stressful. It causes stress, anxiety. And lastly, it causes errors, and it actually causes a loss in productivity. So what I want you guys to do is, if you have a pen and paper handy, or a pencil or something to write with, and paper, draw 3 columns on a sheet of paper. And on that first column, I want you to write numbers. And the second column, write the word numbers. The second column, the word Roman numerals, or the words Roman numerals. And the third one is letters. And what I want you to do when I say go is write the first 10 of each. So the first 10 numbers, first 10 Roman numerals, and the first 10 letters. Don't go yet though, because here's the trick. What I want you to do is write the first number, then the first Roman numeral, then the first letter, come back and write the second of each, come back and write the third of each, until you have 10 of each. Does everybody understand? Thumbs up? All right, great. And if everyone's ready, I'll give you the 3, 2, 1, go. And then when you are done, go ahead and look up at me. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. All right, I got 40 seconds, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46. Got a couple of other hands up and faces up. All right, 50 seconds. 50. All right, there we go. 58 seconds there at the end. So if you're not done, just go ahead and wrap it up and take a look at your list and see if there's any errors. How was that for you? Did you notice that your mind actually felt like it was switching? Did you notice any errors? And now take note of your time, the amount of time that it took to do that. And now we're going to do the whole drill all over. But this time, we're going to do all 10 numbers, then all 10 Roman numerals, then all 10 letters. So you're not multitasking. You're sticking to one thing at a time. So draw the same 3 columns: letters, Roman numerals, numbers, Roman numerals, and letters. And when you're ready, 3, 2, 1, go. "25 seconds, 26, 30. Seeing a thumbs up there, 31, 32, 33. Seeing most heads coming up, 37, 38. All right. So you see there that on average, you were significantly faster. And that's because you weren't task switching, which is really what we're doing when we're trying to multitask. You weren't task switching. And then you probably made fewer errors in addition to it being faster. Every year, corporate America spends somewhere between $350 and $450 million just on the attempt to multitask. And we want to end that. So that can be ended through mindfulness and meditation. Come back here. This is probably some of the things that were on your mind at the very beginning when I asked you to think about the things that are going on in your day. This is multitasking. When you're on your PowerPoint or on your email, but you're thinking about the softball game tonight, what's for dinner in the stock market and politics and religion and everything else, you're multitasking. Well, mindfulness allows you to compartmentalize that and save yourself time, money, and more importantly, and this is the part that I care about, your stress levels. So we want to change that. We want to compartmentalize that. We want to improve our relationships. We want our lives to be overall better. And we can do that through mindfulness and meditation. So these are some of the benefits of meditation. But now let's talk about what mindfulness and meditation is. Mindfulness, as many of you know, I'm sure as you've heard in the last 112 weekly sessions, you've heard something to this effect: the process of being actively and intentionally aware without being judgmental. I just call it situational awareness. We call it situational awareness in the tactical operations that we do. You know, that's mindfulness. As soon as you heard the word mindfulness, there's suddenly this stigma. Well, this is the definition. It's the same as situational awareness. But mindfulness, if you envision mindfulness and meditation as 2 circles of the Venn diagram, mindfulness is this, the process of being actively and intentionally aware without being judgmental. It's a way of living. And then the other circle in the Venn diagram is your toes. So what I want you to think about right now, or rather do, is wiggle your toes. Wiggle your toes as you're sitting here. When's the last time you wiggled your toes? And more importantly, when's the last time you noticed the physical sensation in your toes? That's mindfulness. You can do that mindfulness exercise anywhere, anytime, and no one will know. You can do that sitting at your desk. No one will know. You can wiggle your toes, and literally your focus will be on your toes. Mindfulness is being like your dog. Your dog didn't wake up this morning thinking about what he or she screwed up yesterday or what he or she has to do later today. Your dog woke up this morning thinking about this very moment, here and now. Your dog is mindful. So be more like your dog. So all that joking aside, the other side of the Venn diagram is meditation. Meditation is the formal practice. You can do various types of meditation, but meditation is when you intentionally set aside the time to practice focusing on some anchor. That might be a mantra, that might be a body scan, it might be your breath. And then mindfulness meditation, where the two overlap, that is where you set aside the time to do a mindfulness activity. That's typically what I teach, is mindful meditation. So the brain is an incredible organ. It's made up of billions of neurons, and these neurons, between these neurons, when we pass a signal, that's passed when we think a thought, when we have a feeling, an emotion. When we have those over and over, it develops neural pathways. Those neural pathways become deeply ingrained in us. And I have a video that I don't think I have time to show after this, but I'll tell you briefly what it is. So if you look up this site afterwards, I can send it to you afterwards. It's a great video where these engineers are tricked by welders that work with them, and they basically re-engineer a bike to, as you steer right, the wheel goes left, and vice versa. But the neural pathway in our brain to ride a bicycle is so deeply ingrained in us that it's impossible to ride this bike. And I will show you the video of me attempting to ride the same bike here in a second. Now, this gentleman in this video takes it upon himself to learn how to ride this bike. He's probably 30 something. Over 8 months, he learns to ride this bike. So he unlearns how to ride a regular bike and learns how to ride this bike. And then he goes to Amsterdam and tweets out that he wants to learn how to ride a regular bike again. And a bunch of people come and watch him not know how to ride a regular bike. He's unlearned how to ride this and relearned this. So he's developed the new neural pathway. But the old neural pathway is still there. It just takes him a few minutes, about 20 minutes, and he relearns how to ride a bike. So what took him 8 months now takes him 20 minutes because he had that neural pathway. We have those neural pathways in our minds about just about everything we do, how to get to work, what we think about politics, religion, our mother-in-law. We have these neural pathways, but these neural pathways can be changed through neuroplasticity, and we keep and gain neuroplasticity through mindfulness and meditation, another benefit. So just for entertainment's sake, this is me trying to ride this bike, and I'll show you that it is in fact impossible. And I'll spare myself any more embarrassment and continue on. But the bottom line is, if you have ever ridden a bike and you have that neural pathway developed, you're not going to be able to ride this bike without spending some considerable time. But the point is, neuroplasticity, we can change the way we think, change the way we feel through neuroplasticity, and we can gain that back through mindfulness meditation. As far as changing the way we think and the way we feel, we have on the order of somewhere between 50 and 75,000 thoughts every day. Somewhere around 90% of those thoughts are roughly the same thoughts as we had yesterday. I'm going to wake up, turn off my alarm on my phone. Most likely, if that's where my alarm is on my phone, most likely, what are all of us guilty of? As soon as we pick up that phone, we start checking emails, social media, texts, news. It's the same thing we do every morning. We go brush our teeth, we get in the car, we drive the same route to work. How many of us are guilty of driving to work, and then once we get there, realizing, you know what, I have no idea what I saw, what I did. It was the same path I've driven so many times. I was completely zoned out. I'm sure many of us have done that. So 90% of the thoughts roughly are the same as yesterday. 60% of those or so are considered to be negative thoughts. Negative thoughts are the negative stories that we tell ourselves. I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm imposter syndrome, those types of things. Or something bad is going to happen, some anxiety about the future. That can be also changed through sitting down, calming your mind, and tuning out the noise of the world and changing that narrative. And that can be done in meditation, mindfulness. So what's actually happening in meditation through living mindfully? So the amygdala here, this is the part that's responsible for that sympathetic nervous system, that fight, flight, or freeze part of our reactive system. That's there to defend us from threats, the saber-toothed tigers that used to be around the corners. So if we assumed back in the day when we were cavemen and women that there was a saber-toothed tiger around the corner and there wasn't one, that's fine. If we assumed that there was a saber-toothed tiger around the corner and there was one, then at least we were on the defensive. So that amygdala keeps us alive. But the downside is that we haven't evolved as fast as society has. Now the threats that we perceive are our emails, our social media notifications, deadlines at work, the stock market, those types of things. And so we are living in this heightened state of awareness, this red, kind of a red of a race car, but we want to be in the green. And what happens in mindfulness and meditation is the prefrontal cortex gets engaged, and the wiring between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex is thickened, and you start thinking more rationally. Prefrontal cortex is the rational part of our brain. You start thinking more rationally and less reactively. So you start responding and not reacting. The other side that is thickened is the corpus callosum, which is the second circle there, the second oval there in the middle. That's the part of our brain that connects our left and right lobes. So a lot of the time we live in the right side of our brain, which is very data focused, black and white. Where we want to live is more equally between the two lobes. And by thickening the corpus callosum, we actually start thinking more creatively, more empathetically, compassionately. So we start solving problems creatively instead of just black and white. So by meditating, we also get that added bonus. So these are the quick benefits. It can reduce your stress. It increases your resilience, which I know we talked about at the very beginning before I even said a word. I know Robert mentioned resilience in the same sentence as mindfulness, so that's fantastic. It can, in fact, decrease your body fat by decreasing your stress, which decreases the stress hormone cortisol. So it can theoretically decrease your body fat, decreases your blood pressure at the same time. It increases your brain function, and your neuroplasticity is improved. So you can learn things faster and keep them in mind longer. It can change your addiction, because addiction is nothing more than a very deeply entrenched neural pathway. So you can change addiction. It increases your sleep, increases the depth and duration of your sleep. So you can feel better and start feeling better through the day, making better decisions. It can reduce your perception of pain. And then it can decrease your signs of aging by protecting the telomeres, which are the protectors of our DNA, our chromosomes. So I'm actually 65 years old. I'm not actually, obviously not, but it can, in fact, reduce your signs of aging. So mindfulness at work, how is that implemented? Why would you do that? One, it's going to give you a happier and healthier workforce. Obviously, that's something we all want, because having a good culture at work is where it's really all done. Leads directly to less absenteeism, and not just physical absenteeism, but mental absenteeism as well. People are present at work, but their mind is somewhere else. Well, we want to change that, and that can be done through mindfulness at work. It increases your productivity as the desire to multitask is decreased. Increases your memory, as we touched on previously. Better emotional intelligence as you tap into the other side of your brain. And then you have more effective meetings, which ultimately leads to a happier and healthier workforce, because we have all sat in plenty of ineffective meetings, and we know how happy and healthy that makes us, right? So how and when? The question I get all the time is, well, I'm busy all day long. How am I supposed to implement mindfulness or meditation? Well, one, I tell you that as you meditate, you start becoming more effective and more productive. So you're going to actually gain some time back. There's no exact formula. You meditate for 30 minutes, you're going to get 30 minutes back. It's not like that. But you can get some time back by being more productive. You're going to be more more present at work. So you're going to enjoy it and feel more fulfilled at work and at home. So by putting in a little time, you're actually going to gain time back, and the time that you gain back is more quality. That said, sometimes people gain time, and what do they use it for? They use it for more work. So I still tell you, you can still do it. You can still do it. Maybe it's on your commute to work. You're driving to work, you shut off the radio, you tune in to the rolling sound of the wheels, you tune into the physical sensation of the steering wheel in your hand, you tune into the physical sensation of the seat against your back and your butt. You pay attention to that. Then when you pull into the parking lot, take a few deep breaths, focusing on that, and you walk into work and you're going to feel a difference. And the same thing when you go back. If you can't do that, if you don't have time for that even, maybe do mindful meals, paying attention to the meal that is in front of you and all the 5 sensations or senses that come into play to eat a meal. And add in the 6th one, the emotional sense. As you're eating, how do you feel emotionally? Paying attention to that, if you do nothing else but a mindful meal for every meal, that's going to change the way that you see things. It's going to change the way that you do things, and it's going to change the way that you feel about things. So if you feel that you have no time, try mindful meals. So that is the end of my presentation. Quick down and dirty about the science and benefits. Let me stop sharing the slides. And I would love it if I could run you guys through a quick meditation and then open it up to any questions that you may have. I'm getting the head nods and the thumbs up. That's great. All right, so I do always like to precede a meditation with the fact that this is a completely secular meditation. We're going to focus on the physical sensations. It's not religious in any aspect, and it's not going to supplant your religious or spiritual beliefs. The only reason I say that is because I've had that question a lot of times, and I've had some people who feel uncomfortable about meditating. That said, you are here for a mindfulness call, so I'm assuming you are all comfortable doing some form of mindfulness activity or meditation. So that said, go ahead, and if you want to, if being on camera while you meditate is not comfortable for you, you can go ahead and turn that camera off. Otherwise, I invite you to keep that on and get into a comfortable position, whatever that looks like for you. And closing your eyes, if that's comfortable, I invite you to do that. Otherwise, just lower your gaze. And let's bring our attention very intentionally to our breath. Not feeling the need to force anything, but just paying attention to the physical sensations associated with each part of each breath. Each inhalation, each exhalation. Noticing as you inhale how your lungs expand, diaphragm drops, belly expands, chest expands. And the reverse as you breathe out. Belly shrinks, diaphragm rises, lungs shrink, chest shrinks. Notice how the air and where the air enters your body. It may be slightly cooler as you breathe in, and slightly warmer as you breathe out. And if you've noticed that your mind has wandered off to some other space, some other time, just notice that and gently bring yourself back. Bring yourself back to the physical sensations of the breath. And if the anchor of your breath is a comfortable anchor and you want to stay with that, I invite you to do that. Otherwise, I invite you to do what we did before and shift your notice, shift your attention to your toes. Notice the physical sensations at the very tips of your toes. And if wiggling your toes brings that attention into hyper focus, go ahead. I invite you to do that too. Then scanning back into your whole foot. Notice the physical sensations there, the ground underneath your feet, perhaps the cool air blowing over the tops of your feet, or the shoes covering your feet. You don't necessarily need to identify what it is, but just be aware of the physical sensation there. Scanning back to your ankles, your calves, your shins, into your knees. Again, noticing any physical sensations there. Your thighs, your hamstrings, the backs of your legs, your buttocks, your lower abdomen, again, noticing any physical sensations. Our abdomen is an area where a lot of stress or anxiety can manifest as tension. You may notice that. Don't feel the need to change it. Just notice it. Be aware with it. Sit with it. Notice your lower back, upper back, chest, your shoulders. And now imagine, like a laser, your focus, your attention shooting out to the tips of your fingers. Noticing what you feel at the very tips of your fingers and nowhere else. The palm of your hand, the backs of your hands, your forearms, elbows. If you've drifted off, just come back. We're at our elbows, moving up into our upper arms, biceps and triceps, into the shoulders once again, our lower neck, the back of our neck, and scanning slowly from the back and bottom of our neck up into our head, our scalp, moving to the very top of our scalp, continuing to scan forward into our forehead, our temples, our eyes, ears, jaw, up to your nose and your mouth. And we have come full circle back to paying attention to the air entering your nose and your mouth. Come back to the breath and the physical sensations of each breath. And we'll conclude together with 2 deep cleansing breaths. Begin by breathing out as much air as you can, bringing your navel to your spine. Deep breath in, filling all the way up, holding at the top, and noticing that fullness, and release nice and slow, slow, slow. Holding at the bottom, noticing that emptiness. Deep breath in, filling all the way up. Holding at the top like a full balloon, noticing that fullness. And relax. Release. Slow, slow, slow. And now start to bring some movement back into your body slowly. Maybe rotating your head around, loosening up your neck. And on your own time, start to blink your eyes open if they were closed. Otherwise, just lift your eyelids. And that concludes the meditation. Now I'll turn it back over to you, John and Robert, for the rest of this show. Thank you for this opportunity.
Great. Well, thank you so much, John. That was wonderful. It was quite a journey you took us through. I'm anticipating that some of our participants here have some questions for you. And if you're willing, we can open it up. You can unmute and speak your question. You can go into the chat, type in a question, but let's hear from folks.
I see Fleet's hand up.
All right, Fleet.
Yeah, John, that was great. Thank you so much. My question has to do with being able to make decisions in a moment. We're working with first responders. I think often there are, a lot of the tragedies we know that happen in the world of first responders are decisions that are just not the best decisions made in the moment. We all experience this in our lives. When we're under pressure, often we don't make the best decisions. And certainly if we're emotionally triggered, we don't make good decisions. I've read Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, a couple of times, and him talking about being in combat situations where you're leading a squad, a team, a platoon, or so forth, and you got to make split-second decisions that are really life or death decisions. And the ability to somehow reconfigure your brain such that you can make an objective assessment of what's going on, make the best decision possible in a very short amount of time. What's your understanding of what's going on there in terms of the neuroscience of that and breath regulation and so forth? I realize there's probably a lot of practice, a lot of training to be able to get to that place, but at least in a moment, because generally when we're really in a lot of fear and really triggered with a lot of threat, we lose access to the neocortex and to our good judgment, our capacity to make those objective assessments. So I wonder from your experience if you could talk about because I think it has applications for all of us in our lives and especially for first responders.
Right. No, absolutely. We have a saying, and I don't know why, but it somehow got attributed to the SEALs, but I don't think it actually originated with the SEALs, but something to the effect of, in the heat of the moment, we don't rise to the occasion. We fall to our training. We fall down to our training, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that has to do, Fleet, with the training that you've put in to respond to the particular threat, but also what you've done mentally, the training that you've done mentally to train your body and your mind to respond differently than how you typically would without that training. So if you do some meditation, you live mindfully, you start to live that way, and you start to respond biologically and physiologically, you respond differently. Your heart rate does not escalate as high. It's still gonna raise, but it's not going to go up as high. Your breath rate, your respiratory rate is not going to go up as high. And so now what you see is a greater awareness. You have a greater awareness of everything around you, whether that's in a split second or whether that's over 10 seconds, you have a greater awareness. If you don't do that, now your blood pressure spikes, your heart rate spikes, your respiratory rate spikes. The world starts closing in and you start to see through like a soda straw. And so you react to what you see, which is a very limited amount of the actual situation. So if you're looking through a soda straw, you see the threat right in front of you, and you may perceive it as a threat. But if you have more awareness and you're starting to see it with more full view, you may see that it's not actually a threat, and you respond rather than react. Now, I know that is also said from an ideal point of view, and I know that there are still situations where you're going to get the amygdala hijack. And the amygdala hijacking, that amygdala, again, if you remember, is the very small part of your brain that controls that fight, flight, or freeze reaction, the sympathetic nervous system. There are still going to be times, whether that's with an enemy on the battlefield, or whether it's a crook running away from you or pulling a weapon on you, or maybe your significant other, telling you something that you were not expecting. You're still going to get those amygdala hijackings, but they're not going to be as intense after you've done that training, after you've done that mindfulness and meditation practice in the quiet times. Now, you can't expect when your wife or your spouse pulls out and they're like, hey, we literally, this happened yesterday to me. My car was stolen. I'm not joking. My car was actually stolen. And my wife was like, wow, you actually responded to that really well. I was like, well, that's because I've been meditating in the calm times. When she told me that, I didn't say, hey, stop, let me go meditate. I gotta meditate and get my mind right. I had already set myself up for that. So if you're waiting till you get a surprise to start meditating, it's not obviously not going to help. But if you've done the work in the quiet times, when those amygdala hijacks do happen, you're going to respond differently. I hope I answered your question there, Fleet.
No, that's great. That's great. Really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
We have a question from one of our regular attendees, Alfie McGinty here. That was great. She says, how often would you recommend mindful meditation during the day to stay focused, and how long should it be each time?
Yeah. Is it Alfarina? Is that, am I saying that right? Yes. Great question. So I recommend experimenting and figuring out what works for you, because our minds are all wired differently and we're all going to figure out what works for us. So for me, I personally like to get up first thing. I do not use my phone to wake up, because I've found that if I use my phone to wake up, the first thing I do is check my social media and everything else. And before I know it, I've gone down 10 rabbit holes and I haven't done my meditation. So I use a classic alarm clock to wake me up. And then I go and I get my phone knowing that there is going to be a temptation to check all that other stuff, but intentionally do not do that. I have my meditation apps as my first app on my home screen, and all the other stuff is buried. Like I would have to make an effort to get to my email. I'd have to make an effort to get to my social media, whereas my meditation is right there as soon as I turn my phone on. So I go into my meditation app and I'll meditate between 15 and 30 minutes first thing in the morning. And then I like to meditate again after lunch, about 15 minutes, just to get me refocused for the afternoon work. And then occasionally I will meditate at the end of the day to release some stress so that I can get a good night's rest. Sometimes, however, I've run into, when I meditate, a lot of things will get tuned out. And then the very important things that in my life will be hyper focused, and I'll actually get energy from that. And so I personally, sometimes when I meditate before sleep, actually get energy, and it backfires. So you do have to figure out and kind of play with it yourself and figure out what works for you. But I personally do recommend starting your day off with a meditation. It really, it settles the mind. It allows you to start the day off in a much better state of mind, and you're not reactive all day. if the first thing you do is check your email, you've already set yourself up to be on a reactive stance from the get-go. And that's hard to recover from. If you're going to sit and meditate, now you're in a much more proactive way of being and a much calmer way of being. You're going to be better for yourself. You're going to be better for your colleagues at work. You can be better for your families. It's just better all around. So I do recommend a meditation first thing in the morning.
Great. Thanks, John. Can I ask you a question?
Please.
Since you have retired from the Navy, what is your understanding? I'm sure you have friends and connections there. What is your understanding of sort of the general level of people adopting at least some of these skills, the box breathing and other ways to work with self-regulation, even if they're not going into mindfulness meditation? And also, what are you seeing in terms of this being introduced systemically throughout the Navy
Right.
or the SEALs?
Yeah, no, great question, John. Thank you for that. And funny enough, I got taught box breathing very early on in my career, but it was not called meditation. It was just called box breathing. And we used it on the shooting range. We used it on the shooting range so that our target practice, our shooting was much better. So, when we were on a sniper rifle, whether we were on an M4, whether we were on a pistol, we would do some box breathing. And our shooting would inevitably be better. And nobody said anything about the science behind it. Nobody told us, hey, this is tied to meditation. I'm sure if they did, we'd be like, whatever, we don't want to do it, because that's just the stigma that's kind of surrounds the word meditation, or at least it did. So that comes full circle back to you, the other part of your question. Meditation and mindfulness in the West is definitely gaining awareness and acceptance. And even more so, I mean, the fact that we're here talking about it on a Zoom call with safety and first responders, that's an awareness. That's an acceptance of it here in the Western world. In the military, the Navy specifically, and I know the Army and the Marine Corps and the Air Force have something similar to this, but the Navy has the Warrior Toughness program now. And that was partially developed by a good friend of mine, a Navy SEAL Master Chief, along with a counselor and a chaplain. And so the joke is, what happens when a counselor, a chaplain, and a Navy SEAL walk into a bar? Well, they come out with this Warrior Toughness program. And within the Warrior Toughness program, there's a heavy piece on resilience, mindfulness, and meditation. So it's definitely being incorporated, because I think the military are starting to see that there are, in fact, benefits to it, and not just the performance enhancing benefits, which we do see, but also the ability to handle stressful situations, the ability to come out of the military with resilience, with a foundation of mental health and mental wellness. And so it's a big piece of that. So it's definitely gaining awareness and acceptance.
Yeah, John, I love there's kind of a heading on your website, open up to toughen up.
That's right.
Which is
exactly.
a transformative idea within the world of first responders and military. The idea of the positive sense of vulnerability, of opening and becoming more emotionally literate and intelligent and embodied and so forth, that makes us stronger, not weaker.
Yeah, absolutely. It is strength. I mean, I think that's the very definition of strength, is to be okay with admitting that you're not okay with admitting that you're not perfect, okay that you don't have all the answers all the time. As a matter of fact, the opposite of that, the people who act as though they are okay all the time, act as though they have the answers all the time, as though they're the smartest people in the room and as though they're impenetrable, I'm more afraid of them and what they are going to do. Because in my line of work and in your all's line of work, that's the mentality that gets people killed. So I advise people to run away from those types of people. Run away as far and as fast as you can if you're able.
I know we're coming right to the end of our time, John, but there was a whole section that we haven't had time to enter into, and that is the whole discussion of compassion, because you brought that forward very clearly in your work, and how that sort of fits in with this whole package. So I don't know if you can give us a quick.
Sure.
Detail.
I mean, I'll be honest. A lot of what I teach about compassion you can find by just looking up anything by Brene Brown. She's fantastic. And she has a great video on Netflix, a 1-hour series on vulnerability and compassion and gratitude. That's fantastic. But there's one on YouTube where she talks about empathy and compassion and sympathy. And a lot of the time, those words are used interchangeably and synonymously. And she has a great visual that she has where she mentioned sympathy is, feeling sorry for someone. And that's like walking by someone who has fallen into a well, and you look down in that well and you're like, wow, that sucks that you're down there. Okay. So you feel sorry for them being down there. Empathy is feeling the same way they feel. So you walk by that well, you see they're down there, you crawl down in that well with them, you look around and you're like, wow, this does suck. So now you feel the same feelings, okay? And then compassion is taking it one step further. Compassion is you walk by that well, you see them down there, you crawl down there with them, you see, wow, this does suck. And then you help them, you lend them a helping hand to get out of that well. So compassion to me is empathy with an action arm to do something about it, to do something about what is wrong. That's what I teach. And I don't just teach about compassion for others. I also talk about self-compassion. It's much like the oxygen mask that we put on in an aircraft if the cabin loses pressure. We don't put on the oxygen mask of our kids or our neighbors first. We put on our own. And that's so that we can put on the oxygen mask for our friends and our neighbors, our kids, so that we can take care of others. Well, if we're not taking care of ourselves, if we're not being self-compassionate, if we're not knowing what we need, where we're falling short, then we're not going to be the best versions of ourselves so that we can be the best versions for those that we love in our lives. So that's what I teach about compassion. It's incredibly important, and also a kind of touchy-feely subject, but it's the foundation of so much more. If you don't practice compassion for yourself and others, then you cannot function as a strong leader.